Welcome to Whole Person Wellness with your host, Sue Taylor, Clinic Director at Ellie Mental Health. Let's explore the journey to complete well-being inside and out. We're thrilled to be your guide on this transformative adventure. In a world that often pulls us in 1,000 different directions, finding balance and nourishing both our minds and bodies is essential.
Whether you're navigating the complexities of daily life, seeking ways to enhance your mental resilience, or simply curious about holistic approaches to wellness, you're in the right place. Each episode will dive into conversations with experts, share personal stories of triumph and growth, and explore the latest in mental health research. Our goal? To empower you with practical insights and inspiration that'll help you cultivate a holistic, resilient, and thriving life. From mindfulness and nutrition to emotional intelligence and self-discovery, we're here to explore it all. So grab a cup of coffee, find a cozy spot, and join us as we embark on a journey to make your whole self, inside and out, truly well. This is Whole Person Wellness. Let's begin. Good morning. I'm Sue Taylor and welcome. This is Whole Person Wellness, and today we're talking about grief and loss. I'm with Samantha Rebant, and she specializes in grief and loss and brings the tools that people need to navigate their grief and loss. So today we're going to talk about adults, kids, coping strategies, and ways to support those who are grieving and struggling with what to do with their grief. Welcome, Samantha. I'm so glad that you're here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so one of the things that I wanted to bring up is, let's talk about that whole stages of grief thing.
Oh, yes. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross.
Yes.
So that is a little bit old school. It was honestly developed for a person who was actually actively dying themselves and stages that they would go through and the grief that they would experience. We have kind of adopted it as a culture for ourselves as grieving people who are going through loss. And you may be familiar with some of the stages of anger, bargaining, depression, those types of things. Often those are stages that people think that they have to go through right next to each other. They don't have to be. You can go through the stages whenever you feel necessary. Take as much time as you need to do that as well.
I think, too, it's really important that there aren't any really stages of grieving. People really need to do what they feel that they need to do at that moment. I think that's really important, and not try to subscribe to some sort of a method in order to do this. Let's start with adults, and then we'll move into parents and kids. And we really want to talk about this too from not just the mental health perspective, but because mental health involves everything. It involves, your bodies. Our heads are attached to our bodies. So there's a lot of feelings and behaviors and things that can really help to strengthen us and fortify us when we're going through the grief and loss process, which can be as long as we need it to be. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so oftentimes when we lose someone and we're going through that process, we have a lot of adrenaline that's going on. Sometimes we're in this fight and flight response and we're doing a lot of planning. We're planning for a funeral, we're planning for afterlife events, whether you're having a memorial service. And oftentimes we're not giving ourselves the time to grieve right up front. So I think, acknowledging that and allowing yourself that time and that space to really grieve after everything has happened.
I have a lot of clients, and I'm sure you have too, that what's happened is they're coming in long after the fact when people are telling them, oh, you should be over this by now. You need to move on, move forward. And what's really happened and what you've been talking about is you're so busy doing all the things that you need to get through the funeral, get through all the things that maybe taking care of an estate, trying to figure out how you're going to live without that person, out of the real grief, which feels like a wave, literally feels like an ocean of waves coming over you, and they're so surprised that this is happening to them at that time, when actually it's very normal. And let's talk more about that.
Yeah, I phrase it a lot with my clients when they come see me as a tsunami.
Yes.
At first, it's this huge tsunami, this huge tidal wave. And then it kind of grows into like smaller waves. They may have higher peaks, some may have lower peaks, but they become more tolerable. And they can't become in distance further and further apart. And you tend to try to like learn how to manage those a little bit better with some coping strategies.
Let's talk about coping strategies.
Yeah. So, like I just touched on, allowing yourself the time to grieve, which is important. So giving yourself that space that you need out of your own schedule, giving yourself that permission to be able to have some days that aren't so great, where you're not, fully functioning to the best of your ability is okay. Also seeking support and help, knowing that you just can't do it all alone on your own, whether that's finding a therapist or going to a support group, or if you have a friend that you can really rely on to, text back and forth or call, or if someone's been through the experience that you've been through, engaging with them. Also setting boundaries too. Because sometimes people in your life, they may really want to be super involved and checking in all the time, and that's really awesome. But maybe that's not what you need. Maybe you do need a little bit of space to kind of do your own thing. So, making sure that your family and friends really know, and you being open and honest with them about it. And then finding meaning. So it's called meaning making. And so that is, adding meaning to the loss. So that may be having the person's picture that passed away out and about. Creating some sort of like, if it's a holiday and there's a dish that the person really loved, making that. So you're adding some value and some meaning that just because they're gone, it's not like they're erased from your life.
They're not erased and they're never forgotten. And a lot of times what you're talking about is how we honor that person, how we honor the loss. We are actually honoring the relationship when we do that. I know myself, I've even done things that way as well. For the losses that I've had, great losses, those are not things that you are going to stop and never think about again. They're going to be in your life. And these coping strategies that we're talking about help to carry you through and give you ways to honor the loss and feel gratitude about how lucky I was. I remember using that one a lot myself, and I use it with my clients as well, thinking about how grateful I was that I had the opportunity to have that person in my life. And I also noticed it even felt better in my body. Let's talk a little bit about, because it's not just our thoughts, the things that we literally do and the coping mechanisms that we need. Maybe it's faith or something spiritual, or it's different for everyone.
Yeah, I think with spirituality, grief often leads two different ways. So you either really lean into your beliefs in your spirituality, or oftentimes it leaves you questioning too. So you can have those two different realms. And it's okay, whichever one you're choosing to go to. It also has a lot of physical components too, right? Your sleep can be affected. Your appetite can be affected. You can be in an increased risk of illness, especially if you are suffering from what we call chronic grief and chronic stress when it's prolonged for too long too.
Yeah, absolutely. You can really feel like doing nothing, trying to get your head wrapped around work. Some folks use work as, this will be the distraction to get me through so I don't feel it as much. But it's still there, and it's important to feel it and allow that to happen. Honestly, this is really just how we cope with grief and loss. We're human. We can't go through it robotically. It's just not going to happen. We can use distractions, and some things are good. It doesn't mean that you're going to feel this immense tsunami or wave all the time or every day. Sometimes I think people feel guilty if they have those brief moments of joy in there. That somehow they're not honoring the loss. That's not really true. You can still honor the loss the rest of your life and still experience joy in other areas, because you're not only honoring that person who's gone. I'm pretty sure that they would expect you to some extent to really continue to live your life to the best of your ability. Let's talk about parents. How do parents deal with, let's say, how do they handle their children when there's been a big loss with a parent? Maybe it's a grandparent that's died, or even a parent that has died. These are big, significant losses.
I think the number one thing is to be open and honest. And that looks different based on the ages and age level of the kids, too. With little kids, you want to be as honest as possible with what's going on, and you want to use the right terminology and the right words. You don't want to use the words expired or passed away or sleeping. You definitely want to use the word died, or that something's happened and they're died, they're no longer with us, and they're no longer going to come back. And you kind of want to be firm about it. You don't want there to be some sort of, oh, grandma's just sleeping or on a long vacation.
Yeah, it brings up a lot of questions then about sleep. I've known kids who were afraid of sleeping because they thought they were going to die. Talk about, so I think this would be really useful for parents. How do we tell our kids someone died real specifically? I think that would be really helpful. And then the coping mechanisms they could use with their children going through the process. Because I remember when my grandfather died, my parents, I think I was, 10 or something like that. My parents didn't want me to go to the funeral home. The funeral was different because the casket was closed. And going to the funeral where there was all these people. But there was something about the funeral home. And a lot of times these are parents' fears about what's going to happen if their child sees this. What are some of the things that you can offer for parents in dealing with how, someone has died? Should they go to a funeral home? Should they not? And those things. And then what are the ages of kids how they handle that and those sorts of things.
I think it's something that you talk about with your kids and explain that it's a natural process. And everything is going to die, right? You have you can explain it through nature too. You have trees, animals, people.
Should people bring their children to funerals? What ages? When shouldn't they? What are some of the things that you can suggest and recommend, and how to explain how parents can help their children around coming to even the visitation and then eventually the funeral? What tips do you have for that?
Yeah, I think that whatever age you feel comfortable bringing your kids is appropriate. I've personally been to visitations and funerals where there's little babies and people bring their toddlers and their middle schoolers and elementary school kids, and everyone's there. And they want it to be a normal experience, that this is kind of how you support family or friends who have had someone that has passed away. It's a natural thing to have a funeral or a memorial service, and it's okay. It's not a shameful thing. In hiding it from your kids is not also appropriate too. And I think that if your kids are asking to go, it's okay to bring them, even to the cemetery. Kind of see the process. We learn in social settings too.
That's a great point.
Yeah. Like, if, for example, I know you bring your kids to a restaurant. You don't expect them to behave all the time at the restaurant, but over time, they're going to learn the natural ways of how to behave in these social settings. Funeral homes, funerals, churches, memorial services, however your family and however ways that you do that, those are ways that they're going to learn that this is what you do and this is how you show respect for someone that has passed.
Yeah. How we honor people and how we continue to do it into the future. I know a lot of people will do a yearly thing where they're either meeting at a restaurant or they literally go to the cemetery and place a wreath, all those things where it becomes just death is a normal process of life. And how we deal with that really does start with how parents handle it, how children process all of this. What other things do you think parents need to know in order to help their children, especially when they themselves are really grieving this loss? I mean, it's a very big deal when a parent maybe has lost a spouse or one of their own parents. I mean, those are huge losses. What kind of things can you suggest about that?
Being open with your emotions. So not hiding what you're feeling, because your kids are probably feeling the same things. It may not be on the level that like you're feeling it, but they may be feeling it too. And if they're seeing you cry and you're upset and you have a little bit of anger, you may feel some guilt around the whole death experience. They may be feeling that too. And it may help them normalize their feelings by you having the same feelings as well and showing it. Also, it's important to maintain routine. Oftentimes when something really traumatic may happen, or a death, for example, we may shut down and not maintain a routine and kind of change things up. Kids thrive in routine in that type of environment. So making sure that even though you may be suffering a little bit more, that your kids, they're getting up at the same time that they have been. You're getting them breakfast and lunch and dinner. You're helping them with their homework. You're doing that type of thing. It may be a little bit of a slower process, but trying to make sure that you're still doing the things that you were once doing too.
I think that really brings up a really good point of parents who are really struggling, and the last thing they want to do is have to get up and get their kids off to school. Some of the things that I was thinking about while you were talking about that is there's a lot of times a parent will think, because they're so entrenched, they're feeling it in every cell of their body, that they cannot see the forest for the trees, that they actually are coping when they're helping their kids get to school, keeping those kinds of structure, schedules. Look, if you can't make dinner that night, you pick up something on the way home or whatever the case may be. But don't discount those little things that really help you cope with getting through this process and whatever comes next. And a lot of it really is day by day, just getting through this day and then on to the next day.
One of the questions I use in my sessions with my clients, especially when they have kids and they don't feel like they're coping, like you said, and they can't see it, is what were you doing before? How were you able to function before this happened? And they're like, okay, I was able to get up and take my kids to school. I was able to do all this stuff. Okay. So we kind of move backwards. So how can we get to that point now? What do we kind of need to change? What strategies do we need to put in place? Maybe it's having a neighbor help, or having a friend come over and, maybe helping get the kids off the bus or pick them up from school, or doing a carpool so that we can get you back to kind of where you were going.
You bring up a really good point about asking for help. A lot of people do not want to ask for help. They don't want to burden that person. They don't know how they should be feeling, or their societal expectations, or maybe it's family or friends, or, you should be moving on. You should be moving forward at this point, but you're really struggling, and that's really okay. That's the normal part. Other people want things to move on because they're uncomfortable with what's happening, and that discomfort makes them want to say things like, okay, well, we just need to get through this, so get out of bed and take a shower and get dressed, and we need to do whatever it is, whether it's work or some other family function or something like that. But I think that asking for help gets overlooked in a lot of things. People do not ask for help. People also don't know how to offer help sometimes. Let's talk about asking for help and offering help.
Yeah, I want to start with offering help.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times when we are on the opposite side, where we haven't lost someone and we're not going through grief and we're helping someone through that process, we often forget to go back maybe a week or two after or a month after to check in with the person.
Well, that's such a great point.
Yeah.
After all the casserole stopped coming, and now there you are. Everything is over. The funeral's over. It's done. The rest of the world has gotten back to their life, and here you are sitting there. And friends and family sometimes struggle with continuing to ask you over time, or how they ask you, or is there anything that I can do to help? Sometimes a better strategy with that, is there anything I can do to help stuff, is ask for about something specific. So everybody always says, let me know when you need anything. And no one ever does that. I'd like to come over and mow your lawn on Saturday. Okay. Would that be all right? And if they say no, that's okay. They don't have to say yes. And then you can offer up other things. Well, I'll tell you what, I was thinking maybe I would drop off or provide a gift card or I don't know, something else to help you through this. Because I know that this first few months and all that is really difficult because people are trying to figure out how to live their lives without that person. And it's a huge transition that lasts for a really long time. And that time frame is really up to the person going through it.
And it can even be like when anniversaries come up or the first holidays. If you know that that person doesn't have any place else to go and they don't really have a way to celebrate, and maybe inviting them to your celebration. Idea. And really, mentioning the person's name that passed too. So when you're texting the person or calling them, just, asking about stories. So that you can help get that person talking because they want to know that the person that they lost is still with them.
Absolutely. And they were here. Say their name. They were here. It doesn't mean that you're not thinking about them in that context. They may not physically be present, but they're still with us in our minds, in our thoughts, literally in our bodies, in our hearts, in our soul. And especially whatever your faith is or whatever spirituality you use or journaling, those kinds of things. It can be whatever it is that really works for that person.
I wanted to touch on, grieving someone that is not around in your vicinity. So maybe they live far away and you are grieving the loss of that person. And for whatever reason, you can't get to where they are for a funeral service or memorial or something like that can't happen. It's okay to do your own type of grief service for yourself and for your family. Whether that's, balloon releases of some sort, or you're, lighting a candle for that person and you're saying some special things about them. Maybe you're doing it around making their favorite meal. So you're kind of having like a little bit of a closure of what's going on.
And that really honors you and the relationship long after, and you can do it the rest of your life.
Yeah.
You can do it for however it works for you, for sure. Let's talk about how someone asks for help. The person who's grieving, how do they ask for help?
I think sometimes it's like, hey, do you mind coming over and helping with a certain thing? Whether or not it's, laundry, just simple daily life activities.
Yeah, I think just to reiterate that a little bit, asking just simply, and you can just say whatever it is that you're asking for help. I'm really alone right now. I'm just wondering if would you like to come over for dinner? Or could we go out to dinner or something like that? Having conversations with family, friends. What about work relationships? That's another place where your work knows you've had a big loss. and everyone is tiptoeing around it. Have you ever seen that? They don't know what to do or say.
I think that's a very normal thing, right? We are often scared that we're going to say something wrong and we're going to hurt someone's feelings when they've lost someone. It's okay not to know what to say and just to say, hey, I've been thinking about you. I'm really sorry that you lost this person. If you need anything, let me know. And I'm here for you. Or maybe you can ask them to lunch or to do something for them. Or maybe your work gets them a gift card. Or you do like a meal train for the person and you can kind of collaborate together. But it's okay not to know what to say. And sometimes those that are grieving can sometimes feel a little hurt about that maybe people aren't reaching out as much. But sometimes it's because they are unsure.
Yeah.
And they feel like they may hurt the person more if they say something wrong, so they don't want to say anything at all. But it's better to say something, just even if you're just like, I'm just thinking of you, than to not say anything.
I think, too, that people think that I don't want to get them to start crying. What I'm saying or what I'm doing is going to somehow influence them in some way that will make them uncomfortable. The grieving person is already grieving. There's not much harm in, I just want to let you know that I'm thinking about you and I'm sorry. That's all you have to do. You don't even have to say anything else. And if that person that's grieving wants to continue the conversation and talk to you, you'll know it. They'll say something like, yeah, it was just really tough. We really just didn't expect it. And we're just trying to get back to the schedules now that things are gone, whatever, happens to be the case. What other things do you think that is really imperative that we should know from just a human perspective?
Yeah, I think people think that grief and loss always has to be about death. Oftentimes, grief and loss is about life changes too. So it could be a loss of a job, a relationship, your health, your independence as you get older. Those are all losses. And those are all, you can go through grief with each one of those too.
Those are just as important as a death. There's no hierarchy of importance here. So I want to make sure that I mention that losing a job, losing, we have to move. We have to move now because something's happened. I knew people who lost their house from a tornado. That changed their lives because they had to move to a different area and got different jobs. Loss is all throughout our life in a variety of ways that we're always going to have to deal with. So it gives us an opportunity to think about, well, how do we cope with those losses? How do we build resilience for that? And how do we go forward with all that? Like whatever comes next, because sometimes you'll have one loss on top of another loss on top of another one. How do you help your clients with that?
Baby step, for sure. Taking it really moment by moment, whatever you can manage to do in that specific day, getting through. In the early beginning stages, it's really just getting through the day. Then you can focus on the next day and the next day, and you become stronger and stronger, and you can make it a week. And then you can make it a next week. And you can kind of see the momentum building.
Yeah. Sometimes there's things, and we started out with this conversation of, you have to take care of stuff. If you don't have a house to live in because a tornado took it, now they're trying to figure out, well, where are we going to live? We need food. We need to figure out how are we going to handle work? How are we going to handle all these things? So there's all these logistic type things that people need to do to figure out whatever comes next. And then all of a sudden, when they have a lull in the moment, and I think a good point about this is people complain a lot about nighttime sleeping. Why? Because there's no more distractions during the day. So there you are with your grief. What do you recommend for that?
Journaling, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Making sure that you have paper next to your bed, or you're journaling before you go to bed. And it doesn't have to be long. It can be bullet points. It can be very sporadic. It can be messy. It's just for your eyes only.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to have an outlet and putting that somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
When I work with my clients, I like to also add a physical component to that. So whether that's destroying the paper after you have journaled on it and throwing it away. Oftentimes, like you mentioned before, our heads are connected to our bodies, and we need a physical outlet for our mental health to make it sure it's better. Just like exercise is important for mental health. I think that component of the physical crumpling of the paper and throwing it away, or, some people like to burn it if they have a safe place to do so, but just that feeling of like, okay, these emotions and feelings are gone for now. Now my body can hopefully relax enough to be able to get some quality sleep.
And I think that gets linked into whatever it is that you may do from a cultural perspective, a religious perspective, spiritual, whatever the sort of things that you did with that person. Maybe you're engaging in that now. I know when my dad died, it was walking. We went for walks all the time in nature. I went for walks in nature without him and was learning about that for myself as well, that, I can do this and it's okay. And I'm honoring him by doing it. And it makes me feel better about doing that. That doesn't mean that the loss was any less, but it helped to cope with that loss. Something that we haven't touched on yet, which I think is really important. Let's talk about anticipatory loss. That is huge. Many people know long before death occurs, or this huge, something that happens in their life is going to happen long before it happens. A layoff. People anticipate a layoff. We can do it for a couple of years before it actually happens, but also a death. What about that?
Yeah, so we see that a lot with patients that have chronic illness, whether that's cancer or dementia, Alzheimer's. Those people are oftentimes eventually going to die if you have that type of diagnosis. Oftentimes we can also prep in that time. So while we are grieving the person already that's going to pass, it gives us time also to prep. So we can have that planning time. We can include the person that's passing in on those future plans, and make sure that their needs are being met socially and emotionally as well.
What if, this is a tough one, what if that person does not want to have that conversation? Many times there could be someone, a loved one usually, they have a terminal illness, but they don't want to go there. They're still very hopeful. They're still very engaged in treatment. Even sometimes they're in hospice and they still believe that, there's a chance that I'm not going to die, at least not now for this. And family members are really struggling with how to handle that, or how to talk to them, or what to do about it. What do you think about that?
I think you try having the conversation multiple times. I think it's something that you just don't back away from, because, they may not be ready, and it's not something you're going to press every time you see them.
Sure.
But, maybe every couple months or so, if they have that long and that life expectancy left, that you bring up and you talk to them about, because, you want them to understand what's going on. You want them to be hopeful, but you also know from, the medical doctors that are there giving the news and the science that's presented to you that, most likely this person isn't going to live.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's normal to be hopeful.
Of course.
Too.
Yeah. We do that. We want to live as long as humanly possible. We want that. And I think an example that you can try, I wanted to give you an example that you can try. You can preface it with how you feel about that person. So for example, my father and I had planned and was making plans. We knew what was going to happen. So I would say, Dad, I love you and I need to figure out, what do I need to do about this after you're gone? I don't know how to do it. And being a daughter and a father, just as this one example, he wanted to tell me how to do it, which helped a great deal in handling this before he actually died. So I think you can ask in a way for how, not only how do I do it, how do you think I should handle this?
If people still like control, right?
Yes.
So you are giving your dad the control.
Exactly.
And they want to make the decisions. And so that is empowering. And they still want to be empowered and not looked at like, oh, my life's no longer because I'm dying.
Right.
But I'm still here and I can still, hold power and make decisions and have choices.
That is such a good point. And I think that is a lot of what happens when someone knows that they're dying or they will be, whether they're in hospice yet or not. I think that giving them that opportunity to still have, control over their own life, to make decisions about their own life, all those sorts of things, that's a very big deal. And family members honor them in allowing that to happen. I think that went a really long way with me in my own things. And then I also use those similar methods with clients. What are the things that you've tried? What are the things that you've worked with? And then let's talk about what we think might work better given the information that they can gather about the person. So what has your experiences been with that?
I think that sometimes people think that grief is a disability.
Oh, that's a great point.
Too. So sometimes people don't want to go back to work after. It's not an illness. It's not a disease.
It's normal.
It's normal. And like you said, what were you doing before? What can we do now to kind of help you along in this process to make you able to, get up every day and go to your job or to take care of your kids, to take care of your house, your family.
Absolutely.
I want to add one coping strategy to kind of look for kids.
Okay.
Too, is to monitor for changes in behavior. Too. I think it's really important that if you have a child that is not coping well, some things to look for is like withdrawal. So whether that's from like school, they're not doing well, they're just like not really interested in activities that they were once interested in, they're becoming more depressed, and changes in appetite and social changes as well. Those are really important to look out for, and can kind of be dangerous at times if it goes unnoticed, and that it's important to reach out for help if you see that.
That's a very good point. I think too, especially those social aspects, they don't want to play with their friend anymore. They just want to stay home. They're having trouble just being in their house. Maybe they have some appetite issues, things like that. I've seen that as well. Oh, so thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Whole Person Wellness. We hope this time has been as enlightening for you as it has been for us. But before we go, we want to express our deepest gratitude, of course, to our incredible expert guest, Samantha Rebant, who generously shared her wisdom. Your insights have added immense value to our community, and we're really thankful for your contributions. And to you, our wonderful listeners, thank you for making Whole Person Wellness a part of your wellness journey. Your commitment to personal growth and well-being is inspiring. Remember, you have the power to cultivate positive change within yourself and in the world around you. If you enjoyed today's episode or found it helpful, please subscribe, leave a review, share it with someone who might benefit. Your support helps us continue spreading the message of holistic wellness. Stay connected with us on social for updates on upcoming episodes and exclusive content. We'd love to hear your thoughts, questions, and personal stories of growth and transformation. As we wrap up today, always remember that your journey to holistic well-being is a continuous one. Embrace each step, be kind to yourself, and know that you are not alone. Until next time, Take care of your mind and nurture your body and live life with intention. This is Whole Person Wellness signing off, and thank you for being a part of our community.